Welcome everybody to the Big Picture Manatee. Hi guys.
Hey,
Great to see you. So darn hot out there. I'm glad we're in here in our own little studio doing this new episode on the Big Picture Manatee. And today is a fun day to talk more about the budget, our favorite thing. So we'd like to thank everybody for listening to all of the episodes we've done so far as we try to educate, engage, and inform Manatee County citizens and anyone else who watches us on things that are happening here in our community. I'm Cheri Coryea, former Manatee County Administrator, and also a very proud, long time now, over 4 years, private business owner.
has it been that long, Cheri?
I know it has.
Lies. It's so good to see you guys. I've missed you. I'm Misty Servia, former county commissioner for Manatee, former employee of Manatee County. I worked there 18 years before I was a commissioner. And so we love Manatee County and we're happy to be here today.
Hey, hey, hey. Glad to see you all. I miss you all a lot. My name is Reggie Bellamy, proud executive director of the Palmetto Youth Center. And, I've been a citizen in Manatee County pretty much all my life outside of college and the military, obviously, and proud graduate of the mighty Bethune-Cookman University. Getting ready to go into football season. Let's go Wildcats. And I am excited. I'm excited to be here. Let's have some fun and discuss this budget and find ways to make Manatee County better.
Yep. I'm hoping we have some fun football talk later in the season as soon as all of our teams get started. So, well, everybody, we are going to shift over from our welcome and our football talk to talk about the Manatee County government budget, your budget, the taxpayers' budget. Because back in June, we reported to all of you about what the proposed budget was for this new year. We're in that process that happens every year. Reggie and Misty were part of it for many, many years and had to, push through it. This year, there was a proposal of a net budget of close to 1.4 billion, and then a 5-year capital improvement plan of about 2.4 billion. And now we get to mention something that we said back when we started our shows back in 2022. And as I recall, we said this publicly first, and that was that, if the commission didn't cautiously plan for the next several years, the budget would potentially be a very detrimental thing. And guess what? They didn't. And they started spending like drunken sailors. And that was paybacks. I'm not really sure to who, but you can guess in your own mind who that might have been. And now that we're in 2025, we kind of said this is probably when it would happen. And things are getting really tight, very tight. So, Misty, I know you've been following this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and like you said, like you both said, we love Manatee County. This really isn't something we wanted to be right about, but it was so clear to those of us who were paying attention and knew about the budget that this was going to be a problem. And when you don't look at trends and special event impacts and consider legislative changes, and you're just there to please who you need to please. We're not mentioning any names. These things happen, and things happen quickly. So let's cut to the chase. For the first time in decades, the proposed assessed millage rate that was presented to the board by the administrator in June at 10%, and then certified by the clerk of courts, that's required by law, on July 1st, was a decrease to 7.09%. That's right, a decrease of what was projected in June by almost 3%. So let's be clear, this rate is just the maximum rate that can be changed. We were always told as commissioners, you can't go up, but you can always bring it down. So you want to start at the maximum rate. We get that. It can be lowered until the budget is adopted in September. At the July 31st meeting, there was significant discussion by the board about adjusting or lowering the adopted millage rate, but ultimately, no final motion passed to make a change to the maximum rate. Again, this can still happen until the final adoption of the budget, but it can never go higher. So, Reggie, what does that mean to have to deal with a lowered millage rate than originally proposed?
Yeah, so here we go. And we want the community to keep in mind this is your budget, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to impact all of us some way, somehow. That means to you, Misty, about $15 million worth of previously proposed services will have to be cut out of the proposed budget before it's adopted in September. Okay, that's an alert right there. Something's gonna have to stop. Most likely, this will have to be taken out of the general fund because it equates to 70% of the overall county's budget. So the word propose, new or expanded programs and service increases for citizens, that's probably what's going to be cut. And here we go. This is where everybody started looking a little different when you start talking about the constitutional officers, right? And the clerk, the tax collector, and obviously when you start talking about cuts, you don't want to mention the sheriff, but he is a constitutional officer. However, this is what was interesting at the July 31st Board of County Commission meeting. There was significant discussions by the board about adjusting or lowering the adopted millage rate that Misty just discussed, as well as realignment and separate millage rates for transportation and libraries being realigned. And based on some of the things that's come out of the excitement, that potentially could take place in District 2, realigning libraries may create some eyebrows. But ultimately, no final motion passed to make change to the maximum rate. Again, this can still happen. Nothing's concluded yet, right? We haven't gotten to the final adoption. Cheri, I want to talk more about how we got to where we are right now.
Yeah, that's kind of the message today, right? Is that this is a tough job. You don't just put anybody in there in all aspects of the budget. So, usually there's decades of trends that show millage growth rates. That when we look back at the times that we were there, both as in the higher level capacity and employees and working in the community, you saw anywhere from about a 5 to an 8% yearly average of growth in the millage rate. So not excessive, not too low to be able to do things. And then in 2023, get ready for this one. It grew to an unprecedented 21.5%. I mean, that really threw us off when we saw it back when we were doing the shows in 23, 24. But when you see something like that number that high, right, what goes up must come down, right? So that increase happened, and then the next year in 24 we saw it start to happen. It came down so by 9%. So that 21.5% increase in 23, then all of a sudden the next year decreased by 9% to only a growth of what would have been a good year for us, right? 12.5%. We would have been jumping up and down. And then to this year, where in June, when we saw the first presentation of the budget, the property appraiser had suggested that their assessment showed a 10% increase this year. But as Misty stated, it actually came in at 7.09%. That's really hard to deal with from an internal perspective when you've already dealt with the budget and you've tried to really tweak it in and get it to the board so that you would have the best option that you can, to then have to go back. So last year there was at least, I don't know if you guys remember this, a little bit of recognition from a board member or two that there was going to be this potential extra tight budget coming up, and there was going to be a lot of stress on the budget for this year. But everyone last year still ignored that. They left everything for this new board that started in November to deal with and make these difficult decisions. So obviously they couldn't have anticipated other impacts that are related to shortfalls, like the state legislature supporting reductions and eliminations of different programs that they had, like that would impact us, sales tax, gas tax, those kinds of things. And then the severe storm impacts that we had last year, for property tax relief to families. So recently I read sort of where that stands. About 6,000 claims from families who have been unable to go back and live full time in their homes. So at the state level, they passed legislation that said while you're not living permanently in your home and it's under repair and you're seeking either insurance or FEMA or other relief, then you don't have to pay your property taxes during that time. So that was a kind of gut punch to Manatee County because we were impacted by about $6 million. So there's a lot of things that go into this, but you know, really never know. That's why reserves are always there, and that's why you're always watching what's happening. So we always like to tell our listeners, like, where you can go find more information, right? You can go to the financial management department on the county's website where all the details are, at www.mymanatee.org. You got to do a little clicking around though, so don't get, upset when you get on that department. You go to the budget division because that's where this information is. You look for recommended, updated, or reconciled budget, and then the capital improvement plan, which is also impacted by some of what we're saying, but has a longer sort of runway to deal with and projects. So, Misty, I know there's more details about this, and we want to make sure that our audience has as much as they can.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you just said about the reserves because I mean it just made me flash back to when we were up there, Reggie, and I don't know if you had this experience, but I was constantly learning so much from Cheri and from our CFO at the time and all about government financing and how different it was and why it was so important that we maintain those reserves and also had a little budget where we could move stuff around when costs were higher or, something unexpected happened like a storm. There was just such a conservative approach to managing the money. And I really appreciate having learned all of that because at the same time I was receiving pushback from certain people who said, spend that money. What are you hoarding that money for? You're never going to need it. And this all just is kind of proving why it's so important. But anyway, so what happened was on July 1st, then the rate was certified per statute, right? And I think the millage rate was 6.0826, and it was formally voted on by the commission. Now, this decrease in the collections resulted in some juggling, as you can imagine, and the county had to reduce their request for new positions. They were going to have 131 new positions. Oh my goodness, that sounds so hot. They cut it down by 24 to 107 positions, and that took a chunk out of the budget of like $761,000. Okay, so that helped. So also included in these reductions was a request to the sheriff for a reduction of 3% of his overall new budget request. And that would save like over $8 million. By the way, as a side note, we all know this, but everybody's always really careful. Nobody wants to touch the sheriff because that means that you don't support public safety. If you start cutting his budget, everybody starts screaming at you. But, and the sheriff knows that too. And it's not just Manatee County, every county, they get away with a lot because that's how people feel. But anyway, Sheriff Wells did the right thing. He voluntarily agreed to make this happen. He said, okay, I'll take the cut. And then an additional request to the clerk's office from county administration to remove 3 of her requested positions. That would save like $300,000. That was overruled by the commission. So instead, the board asked the county administrator to once again go to the general fund budget, reduce your request to offset the $300,000. In other words, the proposed budget isn't finalized yet, guys. Reggie?
Well, I'm just, taking a little note, and it's da 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 da. I'm having an ESPN moment, right?
Yeah.
About about the charisma of our sheriff. And I've always said, what a great individual, and it was always great, working with him. And whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship, it's always, great to communicate. But what's identified is that he's approachable. he's approachable. There's an opportunity for him and his staff to look at numbers, and obviously he'll do what's best. But the irony is, it's gonna get tougher out there. That's and I think that's the reality, not the irony. The reality is that's gonna get tougher. So, just discussing the fiscal responsibility in a new way that requires both. You got the county administration as well as board of county commissioners to be aware of these trends that's actually taking place and how they're going to impact. And the leadership has to make, certain decisions, for the taxpayers. And this is where it came out earlier. This is your budget. As a commissioner, it takes someone who has the ability to separate campaign and pressures from special interest groups. So let's talk about that. You always have, what I call the influencers, right? And you have different levels of influencers, and whether it's the people from the community or whether it's, the insight, or you have the individuals that are called movers and shakers within the community. And they can be identified as special groups, and their voices are sometimes louder than other, but pressure is pressure, and how you make these fiscal decisions obviously will be impacted from pressures on all levels. And this information, and how these fiscal decisions and how they come from the dais, and how they impact the budget discussion meetings, and we must be prepared to present actions as an administrator. And thanks to Cheri for all you do, and all the administrators that has been there. But there are some challenges. But as an administrator, it means you deliver the facts. And I paused there for a reason, because in the past, some administrators didn't necessarily walk down, Fike Lane, Fike Avenue, Fike Road, or Fike Interstate. They just didn't get on, right? But you have to deal with the facts and sound the alarm for things to come, and provide options and remedies to the issues. Now, that several members of the board has had public dialogue, and those are influencers as well. That's pressure as well, public dialogue on wanting to still seek options for lowering taxes or lowering or eliminating expenditures and operating costs. Man, that's tough. That's real tough. And this is difficult but necessary, and it takes in-depth analysis. Now, I will put Reggie Bellamy's disclaimer in there. I am not a financial analyst, all right? I am not a financial analyst. However, there's going to be here some things that's going to come out that the proof is in the pudding, based on data, based on numbers, and based on spending. And I wouldn't dare take a shot at the word conservative, because that's not the way Reggie does things, right? Today, so we're just touching on the surface of the budget, because there are so many areas to dive a little bit deeper in. So we must continue review to take place through August, and then let's talk about the public hearings on September the 10th, and the adoption of the budget public hearing on September the 22nd, 5:30 p.m. Be there, be square. So go to those or other meetings between now and then to express your opinions, so it won't be too late.
Yeah, I know. I was tuning in to some of this budget reconciliation work session, and just as a side note, one of the final discussions was Commissioner Bearden he just wanted to lower the rate, but he didn't really have a plan to do it. And they'd already cut, taken the money from the sheriff, and talked about lowering the millage from the libraries and transferring it to the transportation and all this. And so I say this because between now and at least September 10th, they all talked about $3 million more coming out of the budget. But you're going to have to bring a plan. So for you guys that are watching, we're watching. We're going to watch for the plan. What's the plan? How are they going to get there? You know, what's going to happen? Because if you've been staying sort of in tune with everything, most of you know that Governor DeSantis and his newly formed Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, referred to as DOGE, were in Manatee County on August 5th and 6th, conducting the beginning of an audit. An 8-page letter was sent back to the, I think, to the chair and to the administrator, asking for documents for this audit. And so it was a very interesting list, a pretty long list. Honestly, I think the three of us, we read the list and we couldn't really tell which way everything was going. But anytime you hear the word audit, that's not good. So it really kind of made us think, what's been going on. I mean, we've been reporting to you guys, but comprehensively, what's been happening over the last 4 years, last 3 years, specifically 4 years. And so we are preparing to come back to you, walk down a historical path. Let's go. We're going to go all the way back to 2014, right, guys? We've already discussed this. We've already started looking at the numbers, and for our audience, we want you to know that we're not afraid to go back and look at things. We're going to go back and look from 2014 on, look at spending that your tax dollars supported. That's you, things that you directly ended up paying for or covering, and see how those were managed. What you're going to see, because we've already started seeing it, is that commissioners that have been there for the last several years have been doing an awful lot of work for these special interest groups. They've been using your taxpayer dollars, and they've really kind of been taking you for a pretty big and expensive long ride. So we will be reviewing how Manatee County government spending has exploded over these last few years, outpacing the population growth and the median income growth exponentially. These are numbers that'll be confirmed because we bring facts to this show, things that we can confirm, places we can point to that have been reported. You've got the popular report that the clerk has to put out. That's the result of a year prior spending. And then you've obviously got the county spending. So we're looking at all those things and what areas have driven this insane spending and who benefited from it. And we may even have a special guest or two that you guys would like to hear from that has gone through similar things, like commissioners and county administrators. So we'd like you to stay tuned.
Yeah, that is really going to be fun, my friends. I look forward to that. Yeah, so stay tuned. But for today, that's it for the Big Picture Manatee. Please stay in tune with us. Watch our upcoming episodes. We're going to take a deep dive and we're going to talk more about this budget. And thank you for tuning in. If you're a first-time listener, find us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Big Picture Manatee. And while you're there, please like us and follow us. If you're a regular listener, thank you for your continued support.
And I just want to make sure it's very, very clear. As tough as 2023 was for RJB, the Big Picture Manatee has been in existence since June, which was even tougher month of 2023. And so far, we've had 53 episodes. I remember we celebrated
Yay.
50 and everything like that. And we're still going strong. We don't sell advertising. If that comes up and you want to make sure you buy some or give us some, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We prepare our episodes for you by researching the facts, watching, reading, just stay in tune of what's going on in Manatee County. We welcome you to follow us on Facebook at The Big Picture Manatee and share comments at our webpage, thebigpicturemanatee.com. Let us know what the other content that you may want to hear. Obviously, what took place with those, we all want to hear, and we will get it on the air for you. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.